Just forewarning, I'm a Figma fanboy, so I did everything in Figma today. I'm going to be jumping around, showing you guys a couple of different things that we've been working on here at MX. Kind of the structure of how this will go is just introducing what a design system is and what accessibility is, and then just showing some examples of we have messed up with accessibility in our design system. The hope is that you guys will know, if you don't already care about accessibility, start caring about it and really start researching, getting invested. And then number two is to hopefully avoid the mistakes that I made and that the team made during our build out of our design system. This is all going to be with you guys. So something that's pretty awesome is just this morning we made our design system public on the Figma community. So that means anyone can go in and duplicate it and get, I mean, there's like 800 components in there, a bunch of layer styles. Everything is built with accessibility in mind. So it should give you a really strong starting point if you're building a design system, or at least just give you some ideas around how we approach this. So first off, what is accessibility? It's basically just creating your designs and your products in a way that will work for any user, not just your most common user that is fully enabled and doesn't have any disability. On the design side, what accessibility looks like, a lot of your work is color contrast ratios. That's where we've spent a lot of time in building our design system out, is making sure our color contrast accessibility standards. There's also some other more fine-tune design concepts that I'll touch on today. And then the larger portion of accessibility on the developer side, though. So your main lift in creating an accessible with your developers, and not so much on the design side. There's still a considerable lift on the design side, but not so much on the more so on the developer side. So I just wanted to point these out. These are kind of 5 common myths, complaints that I hear when accessibilities. So the first one is that it only affects a small number of people or a small minority. That's 100% not true. It affects everyone. Not only does it improve the experience for those with disabilities, but it also improves the experience for people without disabilities. I don't think you're ever going to run into somebody who says, "I wish that text was less legible or harder to read." Everyone wants easy to read text. Everyone wants easy to understand interfaces. So that's my rebuttal to that first argument. Accessibility is a short-term project. It's not going. It should be part of your iterative process of building products out. Considering accessibility at every step of your product development phase is key to actually making an accessible product. Don't make your products, don't focus on accessibility until the very end. I understand if you have an existing product and you're trying to be accessible, I think that's great. That's a much harder thing to do than just starting with accessibility from the get-go. So start from the beginning with accessibility. And then last 2, I'll just combine them. It's hard, expensive, and ugly to do accessibility. Again, it can be hard and expensive if you wait till the end. If you don't bake accessibility in at the beginning, it's going to require more design and more developer time to go back and change everything. And often it can mean changing major portions of your applications. And accessibility is ugly. So I can see how some people would argue that. It's really in the eye of the beholder. But I would argue that the designs that we've made at MX are definitely not I think they look great. I think they perform really well, and importantly, they're accessible. Dave sent me those yesterday too. This is basically the result you get when you do a bolt-on accessibility effort. Basically, like, you can see how awful this would be with a wheelchair. It's the same concept in building products. If you wait till the end and you just bolt it on, it's going to be a terrible experience. So now let's jump into design systems. So we've covered accessibility. Now let's talk design systems. If you're not familiar with what a design system is, it's basically just a assembly of components. So that's buttons, inputs, typography, color, anything you would need to build your interface for your product. It lives in a design system that's in a separate file, and then you can pull those elements into your actual designs as you're building out your various pages for your products. I'll give some examples of some work that we've been able to do with our Kuiper design system. Just giving shout outs to the designers at MX. This one was from Mac. He is working on a way to show your financial strength in just with one number. It's a really hard problem to solve. As you can see, this is an accessible design and it looks really good. That's kind of the common trend that you'll see across the board here. This is a mobile banking app that Dave is working on. Looks awesome. Clients are really excited about it. A new documentation platform. Again, this is all just using the styles that we've defined in our design system. This one is from Nick. He is working on a kind of a learning platform for finances, and that's a mobile application that will also be scalable to a web app. This is kind of a back-end developer portal. Jake Bagley and myself have been working on this design for a while. And then this is a themed mobile app. So it's very similar to the app that Dave is working on, but we're doing these things. And because we're using a design system, we can easily switch between themes. It's just swapping out colors, swapping out typography, but the components stay intact. So that is just some examples of what we've been able to do with our design system. I'll actually jump into it really quick just so you guys can kind of see what it actually is. Again, this is available in Figma community. So you can duplicate this and see it for yourself. But if we zoom in here, you can see we have all of our high-level style, typography, spacing constants, layout grid, and then some more complex components over here, like a date picker. And then we also have drop downs with various states. Just trying to give examples of how to actually use these things. And then we have our fun new project, which is charts. This is still a work in progress, but we're excited to be adding charts to our design system. And basically what this allows us to do is when I'm building an interface for one of my products, I can just, if I need a button, I can just come in here and grab this primary button and it will stay in sync with this file. So if we decide to change our primary button to a green color, that will update across the board for everyone who is linked with our design system. So, and by the way, I should mention, if you guys do have questions, just post in the Q&A. Dave will catch those and we'll, between me and him, we'll get those answered. It looks like there's a question to post a link to the community Figma project. I'll definitely do that for the webinar is over. Okay, so first lesson we learned, sorry, I should back up a little bit. Now we understand what accessibility is, what design system is. We're gonna get into the actual nitty gritty of screw ups that we made and how we fixed them. So this one is our inputs. When we first built our inputs, this was our style that we used. It was kind of had a light gray background fill with a light gray border stroke around it. It isn't terrible, but it fails accessibility guidelines in a couple of ways. So the biggest thing is that the border color needs to be at a 4.5 to 1 contrast ratio. Like I said, a lot of the design is just checking your contrast ratios. So inputs specifically have requirements around contrast ratios. So the WCAG guidelines is that the border be at a 4.5 to 1 if it's only 1 pixel. If your border is 3 pixels thick, it needs to be at a 3 to 1. And if you just use a background color, or where you don't use a border stroke, you just use a background color, it needs to be a 3 to 1 ratio. So what we did to fix this was we just darkened up the border and got rid of the background color. That helped it to meet the accessibility guidelines. We also changed up the label style just to make it work a little bit better on mobile. They're a little less tall, and they look a little bit more native to a mobile application. So these inputs are now meeting accessibility guidelines. They can be seen by people who have vision impairment, and yeah, they should work for any user. Next one is our status. These are like your reds, your greens, or your yellows, things that you use to communicate error or success or a warning state. We have yet to really find a yellow that works well on a light theme. Yellow works great in dark theme, but not in light theme, meaning yellow on top of a white background is very, very difficult to meet contrast lines. So these were kind of our starting points. We have our red color. It wasn't inaccessible in the fact that our red color was meeting contrast guidelines, but the problem is when we went to a dark theme, the red shifted to a pink color. And when you're dealing with red, you want it to communicate a sense of error or a sense of you screwed something up. So we didn't want to use pink there. So basically, when you're dealing with red, just add orange to it, and it somehow magically becomes accessible. Like when you're checking your contrast ratios, orange really solves the issue. In this context, it may look a little orange, but if you really zoom into it and you view it just as the color itself, it's very red. It's very apparent that that is a kind of a negative color there. So yeah, and then just jumping over to our greens, it was the same issue. We were trying to meet some contrast guidelines. Basically, all of these greens are pretty much worthless, except for our fifth one, our most darkest. So what we did is we just added black. So you just darken it up. A really effective way to do this is if you're in Sketch or Figma or XD, use a HSL or HSB color picker, and then just adjust the luminosity or the brightness value to be a little darker. So that will keep your greens in the same, or in really any color. It'll keep your color in the same hue, so it will still mesh with your other colors well. But it will be able to. Basically, that's the quickest way to get to an accessible color. You may need to tweak the hue a little bit to if it's looking too black or too white, depending on your needs. Our next one was our toast component. Everyone kind of was really liking these toasts. And if you don't know what a toast is, it's this little message guy here that pops maybe in the bottom right corner, bottom left corner of your screen. If you have Gmail, you can see this. If you go and email in Gmail, they'll show one of these toast messages. These are awful for people that are using assistive technology, like screen zooming. The problem is if you're zoomed in on a screen, click on delete email, for example, you'll never see that toast in the bottom right corner of the screen because the screen is zoomed in, and you'll never know that you could have undone that message or got any confirmation that you did that message. So what we've embraced are tooltips, and making sure we don't use actions inside of tooltips. Specifically on web applications, if you put actions inside of toasts or tooltips, a person who is using a mouse will be able to get to it very easily, but a person who's using a keyboard will have to hit tab maybe 100 times and they may never even be able to get to it, especially if your toast has a auto hide after like 5 seconds. So let's say you're hiding your toast after 10 seconds. It takes somebody on a keyboard more than a second to get down to the toast to undo an action or something. So what we do is we do a combination of tooltips, but then we also do inline actions. So this is an example of if we were to click this drop down and click delete on this user, show this this modal pop up, and then leave the undo action inline in the table, so that after we click, after we hit yes remove user, we bring the focus to this undo action. So it will be right in the viewable area of user who's using a screen zoom technology, and will be easy for a person who's using only keyboard to hit. So that's how we approach the toast issue. Charts are very tricky in terms of accessibility. Obviously, we like charts. They're a great way to convey information, but you have to consider how to make them accessible. So the problems we had with this chart were the colors here. This green color on the bars, they don't meet contrast ratios. They're too light, meaning somebody who is colorblind or had low vision wouldn't be able to see these bars. So the way we address that is you just add labels to the bars, and that allows a user who couldn't see these bars at all to still understand the data that's being presented here. I'll give an example of that. So this is with the green bars completely removed. It's not ideal, but you can still, if you look, October is 557, November is 1640. So you can still work your way down the line and find those data points. Another option would have been to add a border stroke around this. That's a 4.5 contrast ratio. So a border stroke around the bars would also solve that problem. Or you could just make the bars a 3:1 contrast ratio, which would meet your accessibility standards. Looks like Ben has a question. How do you put process into place for future designs? Are following accessibility requirements for both designers and developers? That's a really good question. So basically, we put a lot of effort into anything that goes into the design system goes through a rigorous accessibility check. So we try and do our best to make sure we're reading WCAG guidelines before entering anything into the design system, and then also working with developers. So at MX, we have a developer who kind of leads our accessibility efforts. His name is Drew Warren. If you guys aren't connected with him, I strongly recommend connecting with Drew Warren. We can put a link to his LinkedIn. He runs. He's a co-founder of an accessibility Slack channel called, I think it's Utah AI. And
yeah, I just posted a link to it in the chat for you. So.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, so definitely check that out. From a developer side, Drew's a really great resource for helping us understand pitfalls to avoid with new components and with existing components. So to answer Ben's question, it's just a matter of communicating effectively with Drew, who's our kind of our accessibility on the development side, and basically not putting anything into the design system until we make sure we consider how accessibility will be working for design development.
I would say, yeah.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I was just saying one other thing with that too is like um, our clients require a lot of this, and so it goes through a QA check on our client side, and if anything is failing accessibility standards, um, like our clients won't ship it. So so we have another set of accountability there. And to that point, to Brian's earlier point about like why should you do this, I would love to tell you the story that MX did this just because we think it's the right thing to do. But the reality is, we were kind of forced to because some of our clients were sued because their mobile apps were inaccessible. And that's happening more and more. You may have heard the Domino's story. And so just like physical buildings were having to make this transition whenever the ADA went into effect like 20, 30 years ago, we're starting to see that with digital applications now as well.
Yeah, 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 definitely. So if you guys can work that into your QA checks, that's also a huge help. I'm gonna at the end of my slide of tools that will help you guys with kind of automating the check process. So hope that answered your question, Ben. You can post again if you have any follow up to that. Okay, so back into charts. Okay, so this is just the same problem I explained here and how we fixed it. So this is kind of looking forward. This is what we're working on currently today. So Jake Bagley, a designer at MX, he's been working on how we do charting colors. Really gets to the spirit of the law and not so much the letter of the law. Everything we've covered up to this point, all the mistakes that we've made, we're breaking the letter of the law, and we've gotten Kuiper, our design system, up to a level where the letter of the law. Now we're trying to go above and beyond, and really kind of step up our game and meet the spirit of the law. So this goes into all of these colors. They can meet contrast ratio requirements based on how you use them. So in this second column here, everything is at a 3:1 contrast ratio viewed against light. So it meets those rules. But what happens when we combine these colors? Are these colors distinguishable among one another to a user who is colorblind? And several know there's varying degrees of color blindness. You can only see reds, only see blues, or not see blues, and there's some people who can only see monochrome. So what we do, Jake found this awesome little application called Sim Daltonism. If you can see this is just an overlay on my screen, and I have it set up to simulate somebody who is only able to see in monochrome, meaning all color is no longer visible to them. And what happens is when you view this in the context of a chart, the top one is it works really well in monochrome, but the bottom one, these three segments are identical to somebody who's viewing in monochrome. So they wouldn't be able to understand, is this my home segment, or is this my food and dining, or is this my shopping? I'll show you what that looks like to somebody who has good vision and can see this. This isn't a problem. Like, we can easily distinguish green, pink, blue, and light pink. But again, to somebody with that is blind, they wouldn't be able to distinguish those three colors. This app is really cool. You can change out the various types of blindness. So deuteranopia, deuteranomaly, protanopia, and protoanomaly. And the more tritanopia and tritoanomaly are all available there. So you can kind of go through and just check chart designs using this app. So shout out to Jake for finding that. It's a really cool application. So that is kind of what we're doing now to further our accessibility efforts and kind of take our design system to the next level. So just want to go over tools really quick, and then and be done. I'd love to have any questions after this. So if you guys want to start posting questions in the Q&A, open up that way. Just again, we'll post these slides in the chat. So you can just go in and just click on the link here to see these tools. So in your design tool, I guarantee you there's a contrast plugin that you can use for Figma, Sketch, XD, whatever you're using. There should be a contrast plugin that you can use. My favorite one for Figma is this one. It's just called Contrast. Works really, really well. And then when you're, like I mentioned before, just make sure you're using a HSL or HSB color picker to kind of tweak your colors as you're trying to meet accessibility guidelines. In Chrome, there's the developer tools, which is really nice. If we go to LinkedIn, for example, you can simply just right click on a piece of text, and there will be a color down here, and there should be a way to check the contrast rate of that color. And of course, it's not working for me right now, but it is in there. A better way to use the Axe developer tool. I have that linked here, so it's from DQ. DQ is a great learning resource, and they also have a plugin called Axe. So here I'm on Cuberto's website. It's a really, really cool website. As we know, with really cool website come accessibility issues. You can see here we have elements that must have sufficient color contrast. So that's a great tool to check. So right
Brian,
here
I've got one question from the. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good.
I know it's a little awkward to interrupt. But yeah, one really good question from the chat, and I know this is something our team talks about occasionally too, from Hunter. Have you considered the differences between making your entire site fit accessibility standards versus a toggle specifically for certain problems?
Yeah, great question.
Great
question. So our MX's opinion on that is make it AA accessible out of the box, and then provide additional accessibility settings in like a settings menu if you'd like that. A really good example, it looks like this showed up in the chat, was Leonardo Baldwin at Adobe. He's just here in Lehigh, Utah. He came and showed us Leo. It's a really way to actually adjust contrast ratios on the fly. If you guys haven't checked that out, I definitely recommend that. That'd be a really good way to add additional accessibility settings for your users. But again, AA accessible out of the box. You don't have to enable anything. Going back to the second slide I shared, it makes it a better experience for everyone. So why wouldn't we just do it out of the box? So that's how we've approached that at MX. Do you have anything additional on that, Dave?
See here, for example, toggle creates contrast. No, yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, on the mobile side for sure, like, you know, we were also making sure that like when accessibility settings are in place at the system level, that those are accounted for and our app responds appropriately there. So that's kind of in that vein of like, yeah, if a user has increased the text size or is using the voiceover functionality, making sure that the app still works really well in that scenario.
Yeah, I should probably add that to my tool belt list here. Is just like your system voiceover application. So definitely enabling those and actually having those is highly beneficial and definitely worth your time. So
yeah. There's another question in the chat here. It's a little more related to the design system, but we can maybe spend a minute on it. John says, there's a lot of great work and content in your design system. How did you / do you prioritize what gets worked on first, and for which types of users needing accessibility support?
Yeah. Question. So in terms of prioritization, when we first started building this, you really need to start with your low level global like styles. So that's typography, color, iconography, your layout grid. So it is really important that we establish our 8-pixel layout grid from the get-go. It's everything in terms of your font sizes and your spacing and padding and margin. So those in place is core. And then from there, we just prioritize the simplest component to be used on an interface. We have a roadmap frame here, which is a little outdated. But we ordered them in kind of the importance of how we saw us building out our design system. This has obviously grown. I need to go in and update this roadmap frame. But that's how we went through the prioritization process of how we built out our components. So.
Another question related to that, it's in the Q&A. Says, I'm just starting a design system and taking accessibility into account. I've told my stakeholders this takes a long time to build out the library and research all of this. How long has this taken you?
Yeah, so like I think it's a never-ending thing. First off, it's a learning process. When I started this design system project, I didn't know hardly anything about accessibility. I knew what accessibility, like the term meant, and that was about it. So basically, like Drew to me one day, he's like, design system accessible. And I was like, cool. I didn't realize how big of an ask that was. So basically just always don't put a deadline on it, I would say, but we've been building up for the last 8 months. Where we're at right now is we've got our design established and we've got developers working on building components. We haven't got our components, at least design system components, implemented inside of our product yet. We have our styles implemented, but the centralized component library is what we're working on now with our developers. So that's kind of where we're at right now. So, and that's taken us about 8 months to get to.
Yeah, and I would just add that like we think of the design system as an internal product. So just like any other product you're working on, when is the product finished? It's never finished. Like it needs to be treated like a product where it has ongoing updates and maintenance rather than a project that's like a one-time thing that will have a clear end date. And so just like any other product, you got to find ways to pull off bite-sized chunks of it and not try and boil the whole ocean here at once, but maybe you just start with your buttons and get those into a single source of truth and make sure they're accessible, and then move on to the next component from there.
Yeah, sure. And I would add to that, like what we've been doing is I actually own another product, our backend kind of client portal. So as I've been building that, anytime I get a component that I think would be useful for everyone, I take it out of the client portal project and I put it into our design system. So we know that component is actually needed. So it keeps our design system clean of any extra CRUD components that aren't actually being used in design.
Yeah, and I'll also point out, like, we are still in the process of like implementing a lot of this. So a lot of this is implemented on some of the internal tools that Brian is working on, but he has the unfair advantage of those being products that did not exist already. On the mobile side, we're working on a UI refresh. And part of that UI refresh is implementing this design system. But on some of our web products, we're still kind of figuring out how to make that transition. And we also made an attempt at this once several years back. And I think we did okay getting some traction with it on the design side, but less so on the developer side.
Yeah.
And so we've had our share of trial and error there.
Yeah. I'll say in terms of making your design system last, just do your research, understand what are the best practices around building a scalable system. An example of that is like doing tokens. If you're not familiar with that, go and look it up, message me or Dave afterward, and we can tell you all about how we're using design tokens to make our development really simple and really flexible. They're amazing. I don't want to go too much detail because that's kind of off the subject, but they're
Yeah.
it looks like there's another question. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah. I was going to say, yeah. What are some things that made this attempt better or easier to adopt by your dev teams?
Yeah.
I would say probably the biggest thing is having developers who are dedicated to it, but probably even more than that, really bought in and personally kind of passionate about making this happen. I don't know, Brian, if you have any other thoughts on kind of what's made this attempt more successful.
So two things that have helped, or well, I guess three things here. So number one is I went in and I built out a library of these are just static HTML components of all of our kind of core components. This gives developers a quick way to reference CSS. So they can basically, a lot of developers don't like writing CSS, so if you can do it for them, recommend that. We also have our design token repo. Again, this is open source. You guys can go in and use this if you want. It compiles out basically your design styles into JSON so they can be used on Android, iOS, or web applications. And then a third thing that's helped is Storybook. Being able to go in and actually play around with the actual code components is very nice. So these are some of our code components that we can see and we can play around with and click on and interact with. So that's been really nice. And then just getting developers. We're fortunate at MMA to have our head of front end who's very on board with the idea of a design system. He's very much bought in on that it needs to happen. So that definitely helps. We didn't really have to sell it to him. But just in terms of getting developers bought in, focus on the efficiencies that come from a design system after it's built. So it is an upfront investment for sure, but the long-term scalable efficiencies of it pay for that upfront investment.
Cool. We got a couple more questions here. We'll try. We got probably 2 or 3 more minutes, and then we should probably go ahead and do our giveaway. So here, a couple questions. Do you test your patterns with users with disabilities? If so, how have you executed that effort? That's not something we've done to date yet, but I know some of our clients are doing that. And that's, again, kind of like walk, crawl, run here. Like that's kind of definitely on our roadmap of like the next step of things we know we need to do. And we'll be, fortunately, we have some clients that are kind of ahead of us on that. So our plan will be to probably to get up and running will be to partner with them and learn best practices from them as to how to approach that, because that'll definitely be a net new thing for me. Brian, I don't know if you have any other thoughts there.
Yeah, we've floated the idea, but we haven't actually executed on it yet. That is an area that if anybody has insight, please post it on Slack on how to actually acquire people with disabilities who are willing to do user testing. That is something we would definitely be interested in and be willing to execute on. So yeah, but we haven't done it yet just because of the barrier to getting people with disabilities.
Tricky. I guess Derek did just message me and say we have done some accessibility testing with clients with a few blind users and other disabilities, but yeah, again, definitely something we need to do more of. So,
question from Aaron: did you and consider Envision DSM? No, not really. We just went straight to. So we were on Sketch before I started. When I started building the design system, we transferred over to Figma. Figma works great. Envision DSM would work great too. Abstract is another one that would be really good. And now that Adobe XD has linked libraries, they're a good option. So you really can't go wrong as long as you have a centralized, maintainable design file. That's the most important part. And so in terms of the platform, it doesn't really matter too much. So, all right, should we go to the giveaway now? We got 5 minutes left.
Yeah, I think so. Sorry if we didn't get to your question, but Brian's in the Product Hive Slack channel, as am I, and most of the rest of our team here at MX. So happy to continue fielding questions and sharing as much as we can around this stuff there.